Imagine your teenage daughter calling you in tears because a group of grown women cornered her at a farmer's market, screaming at her about being a bad sister and a bad Christian. That's exactly what happened to me. But what those women didn't know is that I had a plan. And before long, the entire church that sent them was about to turn on my ex-in-laws in the most humiliating way possible. If you've ever wanted to see hypocrites get exactly what they deserve, smash that like button and subscribe. This is one of the most satisfying stories of family drama, betrayal, and ultimate revenge you'll ever hear. The painful backstory. My name is Sarah. I'm 46, and for the past year, I've been trying to hold my family together after the kind of heartbreak you don't wish on your worst enemy. Last year, my ex-husband was killed in an accident. You'd think that would be the end of the pain. But in reality, his death was only the beginning. When he died, so did all the lies he had buried. My two daughters, Emma and Lily, 17 and 15, were the ones who first discovered his affair. They saw the texts. They found the pictures. They came to me shaking, crying, barely able to breathe as they showed me the truth. Their father had been living a double life. He had another woman, and not just that, but 2 children with her. And if that wasn't bad enough, that woman, the affair partner, died in the very same accident as my ex, leaving those 2 little boys behind, orphans. So, in the middle of mourning, betrayal, and shock, I suddenly found myself and my daughters pulled into a storm of family drama that no one was prepared for. The in-laws' cruelty. My ex-husband's parents, my ex-in-laws, are in their late 70s. You'd think age might bring wisdom, maybe even compassion. But no, they decided to make my daughters the villains of this whole story. They wanted custody of my girls. Can you imagine? 2 grieving teenagers, ripped from their mother, just to live with grandparents who despised them. And when that didn't work, they tried something even more insane, moving into our house, as if we just welcomed them in after everything. When I said no, they turned cruel. They told my daughters they were selfish for not wanting to raise their half-brothers. They even said it was their fault their father died, because they told me about the affair, and I filed for divorce. Can you imagine the weight of that? A grown woman telling 2 kids that they killed their father by speaking the truth? That's the kind of poison my ex-in-laws spread. The farmer's market incident. Which brings me to the day everything boiled over. It was Lily's birthday. She didn't want a big party yet. We had one planned later in the month. So I gave her some cash and let her loose at the weekend farmer's market. It was supposed to be a light, happy moment. Just chocolate and sweets and laughter. But after an hour, she didn't come back. My phone buzzed. It was her. I'll never forget the sound of her voice. Shaky, broken, sobbing. "Mom, they won't let me leave. These women, they're yelling at me." My heart stopped. Emma and I ran through the market, scanning the stalls, until I saw her, my baby, backed against a wall by 6 women. 6 grown women, surrounding a 15-year-old girl like vultures circling prey. They were spitting words at her like venom. Unchristian. Ungrateful. How could you abandon your poor baby brothers? Why won't you honor your grandparents? And then this one cut me deepest. You're a bad daughter. Just like your mother. My vision went red. Standing up, I pushed through the crowd, planting myself between them and my daughter. "Emma, take your sister. Pay for her things. Go to the car," I said, my voice steady even though my chest was on fire. Then I turned to those women. Some of them I even recognized. They went to my ex-in-law's church. "What gives you the right," I said, "to attack a child in public?" One of them sneered. "We're just doing what's right. Your daughters should be with their grandparents. You should be ashamed, disobeying them like this. A good Christian wife would." I cut her off. A good Christian wife? My husband cheated on me for years. He lied. He betrayed his family. And you want to stand here and tell my kids they're wrong for not playing happy family with his mess? They scoffed, called me bitter, selfish, even told me it was my duty to honor my in-laws above myself. By then people were staring. The shouting was drawing attention. Market security stepped in and asked us to leave. I walked out with my daughters, those women trailing behind us like a pack of jackals. We got into the car, and as soon as I shut the door, Lily collapsed into sobs. That was the moment. The breaking point. I knew I couldn't just ignore this anymore. Something had to be done. The smear campaign. That night, after I finally got my girls calmed down and into bed, I sat alone in the quiet living room. The house felt heavy. Too heavy. I opened my laptop, almost on instinct, and reached out to a friend of mine, one of the only sane, decent members left at my ex-in-law's church. He was older, kind, and someone I trusted not to twist the truth. When I told him what had happened at the market, he went quiet. Then he sighed and said, "Sarah, you need to know what's going on." And then he told me. My ex-mother-in-law had gone on the church's Facebook group and posted this massive, over-the-top sob story. She painted herself and her husband as these poor, abandoned grandparents, stripped of their family, left homeless and penniless. She said I had turned my daughters against her, that I was refusing to let them be part of their brothers' lives, that we'd left her destitute while swimming in money from my husband's death benefits. And the cherry on top? She claimed the two little boys weren't affair children at all, but surrogates. She actually told the church that I couldn't have children anymore, so my husband and his selfless surrogate stepped in to give us sons. And then I rejected them because they were boys. I almost threw up when I read that part. Not only was it a disgusting lie, it was insulting on a whole other level. To reduce two innocent children to props in her fantasy, while dragging my daughters and me through the mud. No, that was it. And the comments. Those poor grandparents. Evil daughters abandoning their brothers. Shame on that mother for turning away from God's will. The vultures had found fresh meat. The hypocrisy card. But here's the thing about that church. They can turn a blind eye to a lot. They can ignore compassion. They can even ignore basic decency. But cheating? Adultery? That's their big, shiny red button. They preach about forgiveness, sure, but in that community, a cheater might as well be branded with a scarlet letter. And my ex, well, he wasn't just a cheater. He was spectacularly careless about it. I still had everything. The texts, the photos, the emails. His parents' own messages supporting him while simultaneously tearing me and the girls down. Every piece of proof sat in a neat little digital folder from the divorce proceedings that never finished. And suddenly the idea bloomed in my head. If my ex-mother-in-law wanted to make me the villain in a story, fine. I'd let her write her script. But I was going to make sure the entire church saw the uncut version. The evidence. The next morning, I drove to a print shop with a flash drive. The clerk, a young college kid, didn't even flinch when I asked for high-quality prints. He just raised an eyebrow when he saw the preview. My husband in a very compromising position with his affair partner, right there in our living room. I didn't stop there. I printed everything. The texts where he told her he wished he could leave me sooner. The emails from his parents cheering him on. The messages where they called my daughters bastards and blamed them for their father's death. Each page was like a knife, but not into me, into the lie my in-laws had spun. When the clerk asked how I wanted it bound, that's when the real plan clicked. Bind them, I said, like little hymn packets. You know, like the ones churches hand out. He gave me a slow grin. Petty. I like it. The binders of truth. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with scissors, glue, and stacks of printed evidence. Each binder began the same way. The cover, plain and simple, like a church hymn book. Inside, page 1. A glossy, crystal-clear photo of my ex and his affair partner, kissing passionately in our home. Underneath I wrote in bold, ex-husband's name, and affair partner's name, a love story. And oh, did the chapters unfold beautifully. Screenshots of texts between my ex and his mistress. Messages from my in-laws mocking me, mocking my girls. That one particularly vile text, 2 days after his death, blaming my daughters for his accident. It wasn't just evidence. It was a storybook of hypocrisy, cruelty, and betrayal. When I closed the last binder, I didn't just feel satisfaction. I felt clarity. The perfect delivery. The following Sunday, I dressed myself and my girls like nothing was wrong. We didn't go to service. No way I was subjecting them to that circus. But I had somewhere to be. While everyone was still in morning prayer, I slipped into the church. The back of the room had a table, as always, stacked with hymn packets for anyone who forgot theirs. One by one, I slid my binders in. Perfectly blended. No one would notice until they opened them. And then I left. I can't lie. Driving away, my hands were trembling. Not with fear, with anticipation. Because I knew exactly what was coming. The gossip mill. By Sunday night, the fire had already started. My phone buzzed nonstop. Screenshots. Group messages. Church members freaking out. The binders had spread like wildfire, getting passed from hand to hand faster than any sermon. The comments online went from pity for my in-laws to pure venom directed at them and my ex. Adulterer. Liar. Shameful parents. Hypocrites. It was so intense that the pastor himself had to step in, begging people to keep the conversation respectful. My in-laws. Silent. Not a word. But silence can be louder than anything. The fallout. The gossip didn't just simmer. It exploded. By Monday morning, my in-laws' grand tragedy narrative had collapsed. People weren't whispering about poor grandparents anymore. They were whispering about the cheating, the lying, the hypocrisy. Church members who had once rushed to comfort them were now avoiding eye contact in the pews. Others flat out confronted them. My phone lit up with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, thanking me for finally pulling the curtain back. Even the die-hard extremists who'd once called me a failure as a Christian wife couldn't ignore the photos, the texts, the words written in my ex's own hand. It was undeniable. My favorite part? My ex and his mistress were suddenly being called every name in the book online. Words so harsh that the pastor had to step in just to keep things PG-13. The in-laws' humiliation. My ex-mother-in-law tried to save face. She posted this dramatic Facebook status about how no one cares for the elderly anymore. How she felt alienated and abandoned. How her great son would have taken care of her if he were still alive. But it was too late. The church, the one place she thought would always protect her, had turned. She and her husband were shamed into leaving. Not in some grand, public excommunication, worse. In quiet humiliation. Whispered about. Pointed at. Doors closing slowly in their faces until they had no choice but to slip out the back, bitter and disgraced. And I didn't have to lift a finger after that. The truth had done all the work. The unexpected apologies. About a week later, 2 envelopes arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside the first, a handwritten letter, shaky cursive, apologizing to my daughters for what they'd endured. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the handwriting from the market. One of the women who had cornered Lily. The second was from another church member, apologizing for believing false stories, and inviting us to come join them for support. I laughed out loud at that one. After everything they'd done, they thought I'd want to walk back into their pews? Not a chance. But I saved the letters. Not because I wanted reconciliation. Because I wanted my girls to see them. To know that people had realized the truth. To remind them that they were never to blame. Reflection. You know, people always say that revenge doesn't solve anything. And maybe in some cases that's true. But when I looked at my daughters, lighter, freer, no longer carrying the burden of those accusations, I knew this wasn't just revenge. This was justice. We didn't destroy my in-laws with lies or manipulation. We destroyed them with their own words, their own actions, their own choices. There's something incredibly powerful about letting hypocrites write their own downfall. All I did was bind it up neatly, like a hymn book, and hand it back to the very community they tried to manipulate. And you know what? That was more satisfying than any screaming match, any courtroom battle, or any late-night argument could ever be. My ex-in-laws wanted to shame my daughters in front of a church. Instead, they ended up shamed by the entire congregation, cast out of the one place they thought they were untouchable. And me? I didn't have to raise my voice. I just let the truth sing louder than any sermon. Call to action. So what do you think? Did justice get served here? If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell us in the comments. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or pulled off yourself? And of course, subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes karma just needs a little push.